Hi, everybody. Let me just make sure that I share my screen here. Okay, yay. I think we're set to go. So hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's case study. I'm very, very excited to share information about Jay. So if you are newer here, we do these every other week to celebrate client graduates from our program. And I think one of the things that's really powerful is to share what's possible, because a lot of times kids with dyslexia are told that you have to deal with this forever, that this is just something that you're going to have to learn to accommodate, that we'll learn to use tools to, get by. But what's actually true is that you can get to the root causes of what is making dyslexia difficult in the brain, and you can massively, massively shift what is possible for this child. And so I'm just super excited to share with you a real story of one of our clients. So Jay started out the course at age 9, and he did have a birthday midway through the course. So I think he was in the program for a total of 5 months. So by the time he was done, he was 10. But he went from being 38% accurate in his phonological awareness to 93% accurate within those 5 months. His reading score on the Wide Range Achievement Test 5 went from the 6th percentile to the 99th percentile. His spelling score on the Wide Range Achievement Test 5 went from the 2nd percentile to the 66th. And in addition, he had other words that were written phonetically correctly, which would have put his score at the 99th percentile once he gets those little patterns mastered. But his mom said it was just kind of amazing. So we'll share his story in just a minute, but one of her key takeaways was do whatever you can to help support your child. This definitely worked, and we had previously done 4 to 5 different programs, and we're just not making any progress. So I think that's a big takeaway that I want all of you to come away with this as well. It's very common for clients to have tried multiple things unsuccessfully before they hit our doorstep. So in Alyssa's case, which we'll talk about in a minute, it meant 4 to 5 different programs before they finally landed on this. And within 5 months, the scores were absolutely phenomenally shifted. So if you don't know anything about us or our program, we employ cutting edge neuroscience techniques to reorganize how the brain is hearing and responding to language. So we'll go over that in just a minute so that you understand more about the dyslexic brain and how it is different. But when you do that, it makes reading and spelling exponentially improved within just a few months. So this does not have to be a multi-year journey. This absolutely can leverage neuroplasticity, and through repetition, you can make some massive increases, and most importantly, in confidence and independence with reading and spelling. And so you're able to do all of this. Mama Alyssa did all of this from her home. They live not geographically close to me at all. And so because we connect digitally, we have the ability to serve clients from all over the world, which we do. So let's dive in and learn a little bit more about what's unique about dyslexia and the dyslexic brain. And I think, being equipped with this information is really, really helpful. So you can see in this fMRI scan 2 different brains. So on the left is a non-dyslexic person, and on the right is a person with dyslexia when asked to do a language task. So if we had these 2 people side by side and their eyes were closed, we wouldn't see anything different about those 2 brains until we asked these people to do a language task. Like, for example, read this word, or write this sentence, or spell that word, or write this essay, read this paragraph. Any of those things rhyme with this other word. This is what would happen in the brain of a non-dyslexic person during a language task. So you can see that there's activity in the back of the brain here in what's called the occipital lobe, which controls vision. And there's also activity here in the sides of the brain, which are called the parietal temporal lobe, which has some of our hearing capacity embedded within it. But what you can see in the person with dyslexia is we literally do not have neurological activity in occipital lobe during language tasks. And we also have limited activity in the parietal temporal lobes as it pertains to hearing. So this is why we misfire when we're trying to listen to language. So again, this is the same information, but from a different viewpoint. These are EEG scans. So again, the typical reader with activity in the back and sides, a dyslexic reader without activity in the back and far less on the sides and the parietal temporal lobes. But what is possible is through the power of neuroplasticity and repetition, you can absolutely reorganize how the brain is responding to language. So I think it's just really, really powerful to know that the brain is a dynamic organ that changes over a lifetime. And so just like, scientists used to think that the world is flat, people used to think that intelligence was fixed and that if you were born with a certain kind of brain that you had to have that brain throughout your lifetime. And that is absolutely not true. What we know through studies in, oh gosh, they've studied the brains of London cab drivers, before and after they took the job. So part of being a London cab driver means that you have to memorize a map of the city and you are tested on that. So they looked at the visual spatial relationship of the brain before and after taking that job. And they learned that absolutely, cab drivers that learned the map of London had a better visual spatial relationship in their brain than they did before. So there again, I mean, there's proof and evidence all over the place, no matter which area that you're looking at, that the brain is dynamic and you can change it over time. But the trick is kind of realizing that this is really what you're dealing with and then doing the work repetitively to make sure that that brain is reorganizing itself. So let's hear from Mama Alyssa as she told the real story of what it was like for her and her son. So they worked extensively on reading in homeschool. So as a homeschool family, she did work on reading with him every single day. And as I mentioned previously, they had done 4 to 5 different programs, all intended to support reading or struggling readers or dyslexic readers, and they just were not making progress. And so kind of that turning point moment for her was when they got assessments back from the homeschooling body that were still so low. So in the state where they lived, they had to do like some testing, and it was still like after all of these years and all of these programs, we are still in the lowest percentiles. What am I going to do? And so she said, honestly, like it really scared me to find you on Facebook. Because there's a lot of scams that you can find on Facebook. And so that's where I found out about you guys. And, to be honest, it scared me, but I listened to another client interview on YouTube and I said, I want that. So she signed up with us in January and she spent 5 months in the program. Before she started, Jay was not even reading CVC words. Those were a struggle. She said he just didn't get it. He'd be looking at the word big, really struggled to read it. And then 2 lines later, big would appear again. And he'd be wondering if that word had a B, a P, or a Q in it. Like he just couldn't connect that was the same word that he had read 2 lines previous. She said before the program, he struggled to read plot and instead read it as pilot. After the program, he was able to decode and sound out discretionary, seismograph, and oligarchy. And again, that was within 5 months of kind of reorganizing how his brain was hearing and responding to language. She said it was just kind of amazing. Before, spelling was a challenge. It was almost like he couldn't hear the word. It was such a challenge for him to figure out what letters to put in the word. Sometimes he would have just random letters thrown in there. It was very frustrating as a mom and a teacher to have him struggle so much. So we'd gone over these things lots of times and it was like he still couldn't spell a simple word. And I will say that that's a common theme among our clients, especially those clients who homeschool, because you start to feel like that's your fault. Like, oh no, it must be me. It must be that I'm ineffective at teaching, or man, we just went over that. And you actually start getting frustrated or angry with your child, but it's really not their fault. It's that their brain literally cannot hear or respond to those sounds because it's not activating for language. So I think that's a big takeaway, something that all of us can kind of lean into a little bit. She said it was an unexpected gift being in the program because of the community. So she said she did connect with others that are in the group outside of the sessions. I know that they called each other, they text back and forth. And for a lot of families that have children with dyslexia, it can feel very isolating, where you feel like, oh my goodness, nobody understands what I'm going through. So to have support from others while going through this program, she said, was really invaluable. She said sometimes when you're going through the dark stuff, to focus on that eats you up versus focusing on the light. What little step can I do next? And the program really helped us to do that. So we do have mindset coaches that are on our team because it is very difficult sometimes to know that, yes, you're working to help your child reorganize how their brain is hearing and responding to language, but they're also going to school and maybe they're also being teased, or maybe they also just got a test back that had an F on it, like those things happen and it can get really hard. And so, we intentionally support with mindset throughout the entire process. Because, and these were Alyssa's words, you realize that your mindset impacts your child and you need to address all these things, mental, physical, spiritual, to get the whole therapeutic treatment. Consistency, she felt like, was the key for them. So because they were a homeschooling family, they had the ability and flexibility to do the program 2 to 3 sessions in a day. So she did 10 minutes 2 to 3 times before 4 o'clock. So, maybe instead of the recommended 10 to 15 minutes, she probably did more like 25 to 30 minutes a day. And, she was able to get that result within 5 months, likely due to her consistency. But she said, I was also consistent about going to each of the support calls. It helped hold me accountable. These calls were huge. In addition, they did focus on sleeping, eating, and gut and brain health. So we do talk about that in the program as well. Like there is absolutely a relationship between the gut and the brain. So kind of helping to look at the whole picture and getting clear on that is really, really powerful. So just kind of finally, she said, I wanted him to read and function at an appropriate level. Whatever you do with your life, you have to be able to read. And I hope that someday he really learns to love it too. But do whatever you can to help support your child. This definitely worked for us. This was the right fit. I didn't want my son to be on a computer. I wanted us to be doing something together. So it made it a perfect fit for lots of reasons. So let's dive in and take a look at his data and what actually occurred for Jay within these 5 months. So as I mentioned before, he had a starting accuracy for phonological awareness at 38%. And so what that test is really asking for is, it's an auditory test where you're saying a word like Germany, and you're saying, take away ma, what's left? So in order to be able to do that task, your brain has to be able to segment it into 3 different parts and understand that there's Germany. And it also has to recognize that ma is the middle sound. And then it also has to put the beginning and end sounds together to say that's journey. And so when you ask a child with dyslexia to do that, Miranda, are you able to mute, or do I have to do that? Sorry, if there's somebody on the call that could mute, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Actually, let me see if I can do that. Israel attacked this morning what it described as that's gonna mess with us here. 1 second. The big one. There we go. Okay, sorry everybody. And we're back. Okay, so when you ask a child to take those pieces of the word and put them back together, that mental Olympics is nearly impossible for someone with dyslexia, because you are asking them to visualize the word at the same time as you're asking the brain to connect to those auditory parts. So if you go back to that brain image that I shared at the beginning, where I mentioned that like the occipital lobe is not active and the parietal temporal lobes are not as active, and then you ask them to like visualize this word and then manipulate that and put it back together, it's darn near impossible. And so what we knew from the beginning is that this skill was holding him back from being a good reader and a good speller. And so when we had the ability to really shift how his brain was able to hear the sounds in language and manipulate language, he went from the 38% accurate to 93% accurate within that 5 months, it massively shifted his capacity as a reader and a speller to go from the 6th percentile to the 99th percentile and the 2nd to the 66th, again, with those additional items that he had phonetically correct, putting him at the 99th. So I'll just kind of show you, again, before he had 26 errors on this phonological test down to just 3, massively shifting what that looked like. And then I want to show you a little bit of what it means on a norm reference test to get these percentiles, because sometimes people share those things and you're like, I don't know what that means. So what we have in front of us is the normal distribution curve. And so you can see here where the red line is, that this is the 50th percentile, or what we would consider average for any particular age. So we know that most kids in a school year are going to grow. And we also know through research that the average amount that most kids grow in a school year is a 0.3 of a standard deviation. So you start first grade, you end first grade. This is the typical growth that we would expect to see in a school year. If the child makes moderate growth, it's a 0.5 of a standard deviation. If they make statistically significant growth, it's a 0.8. So this would be like a 1.0 going from this standard deviation marker to this one. But that's kind of how we measure educational statistics, is we're looking at how much change occurred from when we started an intervention to when we ended it. So if we shifted from this red line to this orange line, that means that we had a statistically significant result, and we know with confidence that whatever intervention that we did had a very positive correlation and result for the child. So let's look at what this looked like for Jay. So when he started, his statistic was the 6th percentile, which you can see here with the red dot. If he grew what a typical kid would have grown in an entire school year, he would have made it to this yellow dot. If he made a statistically significant change, like we're confident that the program had a benefit to him, he would have gone to this orange. And what he did is he went 1, 2, 3, close to 4 standard deviations of growth within 5 months, which is absolutely unheard of. And I'll show you that in just a minute. But this is a humongous shift in his data within just 5 months, which I think is super powerful. And I need people to know that this is absolutely possible. So if you've been told the story that it's going to take multiple years for your child to make growth and change in their reading and spelling scores, it's that they're not doing the right thing to get to the root cause of what actually caused their brain to have that as a difficulty in the first place. So we'll look at the same thing in spelling. So his starting percentile was at the 2nd percentile, meaning that if he would have made what a typical kid at 10 years old would have grown at, he would have gone from here to here in a school year, which is, in fairness, what a lot of kids experience. Like, I'm making some progress, but it just feels like it's little to none at all. If we had a statistically significant result, like we were confident that the program had made a significant impact on his spelling, it would have been to this like orange tan color. But Jay went again 1, 2.5 standard deviations of growth to the 66th percentile within 5 months. So again, massively different results in a short period of time. Again, like he was able to spell difficult words like cacophony and malfeasance, belligerent, phonetically correct, but he missed one of the letters, or he maybe had a pattern off where he put EE for the spelling and it should have been EA. Had he had those patterns right, his spelling would have been at the 99th percentile. So I think it's always worth celebrating the mom that showed up in all of these cases. So when we do this, we serve clients all over the world. And so sometimes they're not geographically close to us. For example, in Alyssa's case, like she lives in a remote area of the country, and there absolutely weren't any tutors or people that she could have worked with. And so what's required is for someone to partner with us. And so when people join the program, we ask them, like, are you willing to be committed to doing this 10 to 15 minutes a day? And can you do that for a couple of months? And the answer for her was yes. We ask, like, also, is your child willing to do this with you and, show up to the table for 10 to 15 minutes every day for a couple of months? And the answer was yes. Like, are you coachable? Are you willing to show up to get coaching and support from us throughout this process? And for her, the answer was yes. And so what I think is really powerful is to show that, like, she absolutely did those things. She remained consistent to the program and the exercises. She was committed to the process and she trusted it. She trusted in us to do what we asked her to do. She showed up fully. So twice a week, we have accountability and support calls. She was at almost all of those, whether she had a question or not. She showed up fully to be coached and supported throughout this process. She recognized that her own mindset had an impact on her son, and she was willing to get coaching and support to show up as her best self. And, as an added benefit, she made connections with others in our community and even outside of the sessions. And so her advice to others is do whatever you can to help support your child. This program definitely worked for us. And so I really just want to celebrate her throughout this process, because without her, this wouldn't have been possible. We can give the strategies to a family, but unless they're actually committed to doing the process, getting coaching, being committed to the work, even the best of the strategies will not work unless you are consistently doing what we ask you to do. So I just really want to celebrate her throughout that process. But it is amazing to see, like, that this happens client over client. So if you've been with us for a while, you know that every other week we're celebrating one of our graduates, because this happens client over client. So as I mentioned, the average growth for a kid within a whole school year is 0.3. If we would have had statistically significant growth, it's a 0.8. Our average retrain the dyslexic brain graduate makes 1.7 standard deviations of growth within a couple of months. And so again, like, we can't guarantee you, because we can't guarantee the way that you're going to show up. But if you show up and if you're consistently doing the work and getting the coaching, absolutely, you can get massive results, because this is the average of what clients are able to do in the program, which is just massively, massively statistically different from the starting percentile. So, I do also want to highlight, in case anybody wants to dig into the statistics, John Hattie is a researcher who has done meta-analyses, so studies of studies on the impacts of learning. So he published several iterations of the study called Visible Learning for Teachers, but he looked at 252 influences of what makes learning the most impactful. And I want you to just look at the standard deviations of change. So most of these are like a 0.6, a 0.7, a 0.9, a 1.2, a 1.3. In Jay's case, he made a 3.5. So, like, the statistical significance of what we're doing is greater than some of the greatest effect sizes that have been published to date. And so we're super proud of that, and something that we're shouting from the rooftops that, like, look, the way that we are previously remediating what dyslexia looks like is maybe not as effective. But when you do this right, and you actually focus on changing the way that the brain is hearing and responding to language, you can have a massive impact on the way that reading and spelling looks for the child. So why is it so critical to close the gap? And and look for an intervention that is going to have massive gain. I think the thing that's most important to consider is time. So the longer that this takes, it doesn't mean that a child couldn't be successful through tutoring, but I'll be honest and tell you that most tutoring is going to be a multi-year process that is going to take 2 to 5 years on average. And in that time, there are inevitably missed opportunities, current and ongoing struggle, future opportunities that are missed out on. And there's suffering that occurs. It's not just the child with dyslexia that suffers because of this. It is the parent, anybody who's trying to teach the child. Often the siblings or the whole household can be affected because it is common to have anger or frustration as it pertains to dyslexia, or be anxious or be depressed. I mean, I think those are kind of the top 3 symptoms that we see over and over again in clients. And so that has an effect on everybody. So the more quickly that you can shift out of this, the more that you have the potential to really shift that belief cycle in what's possible and your potential and what actions you can take and the results that you get. And that shift into like the greater self of this little person is absolutely powerful. And so you can have increases in academic performance, increases in self-esteem and confidence, better mental health, greater access to opportunities, which absolutely matter. So I want to invite you to, potentially think about 2 different opportunities that you may need to lean into depending on where you're at. So if you are listening to this and you do not yet know if your child is really struggling with dyslexia, I would invite you to join our Dyslexia Discovery Workshop. So this is an online screening tool that you can learn for sure whether or not it's dyslexia that you're dealing with, and it's just 20 minutes. So I know sometimes there can be waiting lists for multiple months. It can be thousands of dollars. That can be a challenge sometimes to just figure out, is that even what we're dealing with? So if that's you, absolutely reach out, and you can find access to these things too on our webpage at drrebeccatroy.com. But I would highly recommend that you dig into the Discovery Workshop if you haven't confirmed that for yourself. And also, if you're a parent who's like, wow, we are in the same place that Alyssa was. We've tried multiple things and we are still seeing minimal, if any, progress. And we've had our own crossroads where we've got to do something. I would invite you to book a complimentary call with our team. And so what they do on those calls, they're wonderful, is our team will dig in specifically to your child's case. We'll ask you a bunch of questions to learn about whether or not we can actually help you. And if we can, we will walk you through exactly what that looks like. And if we can't, we'll let you know that too. It's not for everybody. And like I said, you absolutely have to be on board to be committed to the process. You have to be willing to do 10 to 15 minutes a day. You have to be coachable throughout this process in order to be successful. But if that's you and you're like, yeah, absolutely, I want this kind of change, then I would invite you to book a complimentary session with our team to see if the program is the right fit for you. So with that, I just want to give just one last shout out to both Jay and his mother for the incredible work that they did. I'm proud of them for trusting the process and absolutely shifting his life. So thank you to all of you who are here to celebrate them today. That concludes our case study portion. And now I'll open it up to any questions that any participant may want to ask. Would anybody be interested in asking any questions today? Anybody? Okay, awesome. Well, if you do have questions that maybe you thought of afterwards, you can absolutely email us at support@retrainthedyslexicbrain.com. We would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. But thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you again at our next celebration in 2 weeks. Thanks, everyone.